Chapter 4. What Books and Burials Tell Us. One of the oldest books in the world. You may have heard about Vedas. There are four of them: the Rig Veda, Samved, Yajurved, and Atharveda. The oldest Veda is the Rig Veda, composed about 35,000 3,500 years ago. The Rig Veda includes more than 1,000 hymns, called Shukta or well said. These hymns are in praise of various gods and goddesses. Three gods are especially important: Agni, the god of fire; Indra, the warrior god; and Soma, a plant from which a special drink was prepared. These hymns were composed by sages, rishi, priests taught students to recite and memorize each syllable, word, and sentence, bit by bit, with great care. Most of the hymns were composed, taught, and learned by men. A few were composed by women. The Rig Veda is in Old or Vedic Sanskrit, which is different from Sanskrit you learn in school these days. Sanskrit and other languages. Sanskrit is a part of a family of languages known as Indo-European. Some Indian languages such as Assamese, Gujarati, Hindi, Kashmiri, and Sindhi. Asian languages such as Persian and many European languages such as English, French, German, Greek, Italian, and Spanish belong to this family. They are called a family because they originally had words in common. Take the word mantra, Sanskrit, ma, Hindi, and mother, English. Do you notice any similarities? Other languages used in subcontinent belong to different families. For instance, those used in northeast belong to Tibeto-Burman family. Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam belong to the Dravidian family, and languages spoken in Jharkhand and parts of central India belong to Austro-Asiatic family. The books we use are written and printed. The Rig Veda was recited and heard, rather than read. It was written down several centuries after it was first composed and printed less than 200 years ago. How historians study the Rig Veda. Historians, like archaeologists, find out about the past, but in addition to the material remains, they examine written sources as well. Let us see how. They study the Rig Veda. Some of the hymns in Rig Veda are in the form of dialogues. This is a part of one such hymn, a dialogue between the sage named Vishwamitra and two rivers, Beas and Satluj, that were worshipped as goddesses. Vishwamitra and rivers. Vishwamitra, O rivers, come down from the mountains like two swift horses, like two shining cows that lick their calves. You move like chariots to sea through the power of Indra. You are full of water and wish to unite with one another. The rivers. We, who are full of water, move along the path the gods have made for us. Once we start flowing, we cannot be stopped. Why do you pray to us, O sage Vishwamitra? O sisters, please listen to me. The singer who has come from a distance with his chariot and carts. Let your waters not rise above our exit, so that we can cross safely the rivers. We will listen to your prayers so that you can cross safely. Historians point out that this hymn was composed in area where these rivers flow. They also suggest that sage lived in a society where horses and cows were valued animals. That is why the rivers are compared to horses and cows. Do you think chariots were also important? Give reason for your answer. Read the verses and find out what are the modes of the transport that are mentioned. Other rivers, especially the Indus and its other tributaries, and the Saravati and Saraswati, are also named in the hymns. The Ganga and Yamuna are named only once. cattle, horses, and chariots. There are many prayers in Rig Veda for cattle, children, especially sons, and horses. Horses were yoked to chariots that are used in battles, which were fought to capture cattle. Battles were also fought for land, which was important for pastures and for growing hardy crops that ripen quickly, such as barley. Some battles were fought for water and to capture people. Some of the wealth that was obtained was kept by leaders, some was given to the priest, and rest was distributed amongst the people. Some wealth was used for the performance of yajnas or sacrifices, in which offerings were made into the fire. These were meant for god and goddesses. Offerings could include ghee, grain, and in some cases animals. Most men took part in these wars. There was no regular army, but there were assemblies where people met and discussed matters of war and peace. They also chose leaders who were often brave and skillful warriors. Words to describe people. There are several ways of describing people in terms of work they do, the language they speak, the place they belong to, their family, their communities, and cultural practices. Let us see some of the words used to describe people found in Rig Veda. There are two groups who are described in the terms of their work: the priests, sometimes called as Brahmins, who perform various rituals, and Rajas. These Rajas were not like the ones you will be learning about later. They will not have capital cities, places, or armies, nor they collect taxes. Generally, sons do not automatically succeed fathers as Rajas. Read the previous section once more and see whether you find out what the Rajas did. Two words used to describe the people or the community as a whole. One was the word Jana, which we still use in Hindi and other languages. The other was wish. The word Vishya comes from wish. You learn more about this in chapter 5. Several wish or jana are mentioned by name, so we find reference to the Puru Jana or Vish, the Bharat Jana or Vish, the Yadu Jana or Vish, and so on. Do you find these names sound familiar? Sometimes the people who compose the hymns describe themselves as Aryas and call their opponents Dasas or Dasyas. These were people who did not perform sacrifices and probably spoke different languages. Later, the term dasa and the feminine dasi came to mean slave. Slaves were women and men who were often captured in the war. They were treated as the property of their owner, who could make them do whatever work they want. While the Rig Veda was being composed in the northwest of the subcontinent, there were other developments elsewhere. Let us look at some of these. Silent Sentinels, the story of megaliths. Look at the illustrations on the next page. These stone boulders are known as megaliths, literally big stones. These were carefully arranged by peoples and were used to mark burial sites. The practice of erecting megaliths began about 3000 years ago and was prevalent throughout the Deccan, South India, in northeast and Kashmir. Some important megalith sites are shown on map 2. While some megaliths can be seen on the surface, other megalith burials are often underground. Sometimes archaeologists find a circle of stone boulder or a single large stone standing on the ground. These are the only indications that there are burial beneath. There were several things that people did to make megaliths. We have made a list here. Try and arrange them in a correct order. Digging pits in the earth, transporting stones, breaking boulders, placing stones in position, finding suitable stone, shaping stones, burying the dead. All these burials have some common features. Generally, the dead was buried with distinctive parts which are called black and red wood. Also found are tools and weapons of iron and sometimes skeletons of horses, horse equipments, and ornaments of the stone and gold. Was iron used in Harappan cities? Finding out about social differences. Archaeologists think that objects found with skeleton probably belong to dead person. Sometimes more objects are found in one grave than in other. Find Brahmagiri on map 2. Here one skeleton was buried with 33 gold beads, 2 stone beads, 4 copper bangles and one conch shell. Other skeletons have only a few parts. These finds suggest that there was some difference in status amongst the people who were buried. Some were rich, other poor, some chief, other followers. Were some burial spot meant for certain families? Sometimes Sometimes megaliths contain more than one skeleton. This indicates that people, perhaps belonging to the same family, were buried in the same place, though not at the same time. The bodies of those who died later were brought into the grave through the portholes. Stone circles of the boulders placed on the surface probably served as a signpost to find the burial site, so that the people could return to the same place whenever they wanted to. A special burial at Inamagon. Find Inamagon on map 2. It is the site on the river God, a tributary of Bhima. It was occupied between 3600 to 2700 years ago. Here, adults were generally buried in the ground, laid out straight with the head towards the north. Sometimes burials were within the houses. Vessels that probably contained food and water were placed with the dead. One man was found buried in a large, four-legged clay jar in the courtyard of a five-roomed house, one of the largest houses at the site in the center of the settlement. This house also had granary. The body was placed in a cross-legged position. Do you think this was the body of the chief? Give reason for your answer. What skeleton tell us? It is easy to make out a skeleton of a child from its small size. However, there are no major differences in the bone of a girl and a boy. Can we make out whether a skeleton was of a man or a woman? Sometimes people decide on the basis of what is found with the skeleton. For instance, if the skeleton is found with a jewelry, it is sometimes thought to be that a woman. However, there are problems with this. Often men also wore ornaments. A better way of figuring out the sex of a skeleton is to look at the bone structure. The hip or the pelvic area of a woman is generally larger to enable childbearing. These distinctions are based on modern skeleton studies. About 2000 years ago, there was a famous physician named as Charkara who wrote a book on medicine known as Charka Shamhita. There, he states that a human body has 360 bones, and this is much larger number than 200 bones that are recognized in modern anatomy. Charkara arrived at the figure of counting teeth, joints, and cartilage. How do you think he found out about the human body in such a great detail? Occupation at Inamagon. Archaeologists have found seeds of wheat, barley, rice, pulses, millets, peas, and sesame. Bones of number of animals, many bearing cut marks that show that they have been used as food, have also been found. These include cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep, dog, horse, ass, pig, sambar, spotted deer, black buck, antelope, hare, and mongoose, besides birds, crocodile, turtle, crab, and fish. There is evidence that fruits such as burr, amla, jamun, date, and variety of berries were collected. Use the evidence to list the possible occupations of the people at Inamagon. Elsewhere, find China in your atlas. Around 3500 years ago, we find some of the first evidence of writing in China. These writings were on animal bones. These are called as oracle bones because they were used to predict the future. Kings got scribes to write questions on the bones. Would they win battle? Would the harvest be good? Would they have sons? The bones were then put on fire and they cracked because of heat. Then fortune tellers studied these cracked and tried to predict the future. As you may expect, they sometimes made mistakes. These kings lived in palaces and cities. They amassed vast quantities of wealth, including large laboratory decorated bronze vessels. However, they did not know the use of iron. Thank you so much. Please like, share share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.